At my son's lavish engagement gala, he stood up and introduced me to his CEO with a sneer. "This is my father, the parasite who has never contributed a dime to my success." 100 guests froze, staring at me with pity and amusement. They waited for me to explode, but I remained silent because my pocket held the evidence of his crimes, and his boss was about to find out exactly who I really was. "Thank you for staying until this moment. Answer honestly. If someone you love is planning to destroy you, would you confront them publicly, or stay silent and let their actions expose everything?" The rain didn't just fall, it hammered against the glass doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel, demanding to be let in. It was a cold, unforgiving September night in Chicago, the kind that seeps right through your clothes and settles in your bones. I stood outside, gripping the handle of my umbrella until my knuckles turned white. Cold water dripped onto my shoes. They were 10 years old. The leather cracked near the toes, just like my suit. Just like me. Just go in, I told myself. Say congratulations. Then leave. I didn't belong here. I was a gray shadow about to walk into a room full of peacocks. But I had made a promise. I pushed the heavy door open. The air hit me instantly. A wall of heat scented with expensive perfume, champagne, and old money. The ballroom glowed like a jewel box. Gold light bounced off crystal chandeliers, blinding me for a second. I walked onto the plush carpet, feeling smaller with every step. I tugged at my frayed cuffs, trying to hide the wear and tear. But deep down, I knew the truth. You can't hide who you are. I spent my life balancing books, finding the missing numbers, making things add up. But tonight, I was just a liability in a room full of assets. Then I saw him. Brandon, my son. He was across the room, standing directly under the center chandelier. He looked like a prince in his tailored tuxedo. He held a champagne flute like a scepter, his head thrown back in laughter, his teeth white and perfect. Beside him stood Tiffany. She wore gold, shimmering under the lights like a trophy that had just been polished. She was beautiful, yes, but her eyes were cold. She scanned the room not with joy but with calculation, estimating the net worth of every guest. She whispered something to Brandon. He laughed harder. My daughter, Jessica, was near the bar with her husband, Kevin. Kevin was a lawyer with slick back hair and a shark's smile. They looked perfect. A perfect, happy family. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Was it pride? Maybe. Or maybe it was the hollow ache of loneliness. The house had been so quiet since Margaret passed. I just wanted to wave. I just wanted to be a father for a moment. I started to walk toward them. Brandon turned. His eyes locked onto mine. The smile vanished instantly. It was like a light switch flipping off in an empty room. He whispered something to Tiffany. She looked at me and sneered, a tiny, subtle curl of her lip that said I was dirt on her shoe. Brandon handed her his glass and started walking toward me. He moved fast, cutting through the crowd like a knife. He didn't look happy. He looked annoyed. "Dad," he said when he reached me. He didn't hug me. He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep, hard enough to bruise. "You made it," he said. His voice was tight, a wire ready to snap. "I just wanted to congratulate you," I stammered. "Come with me," he hissed. He pulled me, not to a quiet corner where we could talk. He dragged me toward the center of the room. "Brandon." "Wait," I said, stumbling slightly. "There are people you need to meet," he said. His grip tightened. I wasn't a father being introduced to friends. I was a prop being moved across a stage. We stopped in front of a circle of men. These were the titans of Chicago, men in Italian suits who ran the city. In the center stood a giant Arthur Sterling, CEO of Sterling Global, a legend. He held a tumbler of water, looking bored, until his gray eyes landed on me. Brandon cleared his throat loudly. "Everyone, listen up!" The music seemed to fade. The room went quiet. The spotlight was on us. Brandon beamed. He slapped my shoulder. It wasn't affectionate. It was heavy and patronizing. "This is my father," Brandon announced, his voice booming. "Robert Vance." I managed a weak smile, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out my hand to Mr. Sterling. "Honored," I started. Brandon didn't let me finish. "The parasite," Brandon said. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "Parasite." I froze. My hand was still extended, trembling slightly. Arthur Sterling didn't take it. "Excuse me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Brandon grinned. He looked around the circle of powerful men, inviting them to join the joke. "Always living off others' success," he said, his voice smooth and cruel, never contributed a thing. Behind me, I heard a giggle. It was Jessica. "That's Dad for you," she said, sipping her drink. "Always with his hand out." Kevin, her husband, smirked. "Some people work, some people leech." I felt the blood drain from my face. The room spun. My own children, my flesh and blood, mocking me. For sport, to impress a billionaire. The guests shifted uncomfortably. They looked at their shoes, embarrassed for me. I wanted to dissolve into the floor. I wanted to stop existing. But Arthur Sterling didn't look away. He didn't laugh. He set his glass down on a passing tray with a sharp clink. The sound cut through the tension like a gunshot. Arthur stared at Brandon, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at me. His eyes were gray and piercing. He studied my face, my frayed suit, the water stains on my shoes. He saw everything. "Mr. Vance," Arthur said. His voice was deep, a rumble of distant thunder. "My office, Monday morning." He checked his watch. 8 a.m. sharp. He turned his back on my son and walked away. The circle broke. Brandon looked confused. The cruelty on his face was replaced by panic. "What was that about?" he muttered. "I didn't stay to find out." I turned, my legs feeling like lead pipes. I walked out of the ballroom, past the staring eyes, past the whispers. I got into my car and sat there in the dark. My hands shook so hard, I dropped the keys on the floor mat. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, listening to the rain assault the roof. Parasite. Is that really what they thought of me? The drive home was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, distorting the streetlights into long, bleeding streaks of yellow and red. I navigated the familiar suburban streets on autopilot. My mind stuck on a loop. Parasite. The word echoed in the hum of the engine. I pulled into the driveway of the house where I had raised 3 children. It used to be a place of noise, bicycles in the yard, music blaring from bedroom windows, the smell of dinner drifting to the curb. Now it stood dark and silent against the storm. A tomb of brick and mortar. I sat in the car for a long time, the engine ticking as it cooled. I didn't want to go inside. Inside meant facing the empty chair in the living room. Inside meant admitting that the family I built was broken beyond repair. Finally, the cold forced me out. I unlocked the back door and stepped into the kitchen. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew the layout by heart. I walked to the small wooden table, the one where we used to pay bills and grade homework, and collapsed into a chair. The silence of the house was heavier than the noise of the party. It pressed against my ears. I pulled my wallet from my wet jacket. My fingers were numb, fumbling with the leather. I slid out a small creased photograph. Margaret, my wife, gone 18 months now. Cancer doesn't just kill a person, it thieves. It steals the future and then it steals the past, turning every happy memory into a sharp edge that cuts you. I ran my thumb over her face in the photo. I closed my eyes, and I could still hear the beeping of the hospital machines. I could feel her hand, frail as a bird's wing, gripping mine with surprising strength. Her eyes had been bright with fever, but her mind was clear. "Promise me, Robert," she had whispered, her voice barely a rustle of dry leaves. "Help Brandon one last time." I had hesitated then. "He's 30 years old, Maggie. He's lost," she had insisted. "He needs to grow up. Promise me you'll help him find his way." "I promise," I'd said. I opened my eyes in the dark kitchen. I had kept that promise. I gave him money I didn't have. I co-signed loans I couldn't afford. I let him use my name, my reputation, my credit, and tonight he had repaid me with humiliation. He hadn't grown up. He had just grown cruel. Knock, knock. The sound made me jump. It came from the back door, soft, hesitant, but distinct. I froze. It was late. The storm was raging. Who would be here? I stood up, my eyes popping, and peered through the glass. A familiar face stared back, framed by a rain hood. Martha, my neighbor. She was 72, a retired schoolteacher, with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She held a plate covered in foil. I opened the door. "I saw your car pull in," she said, her voice battling the wind. But no lights came on. She stepped inside, shaking off her umbrella. She looked at my soaked suit, my slumped shoulders. The misery etched into my face. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew better. They hurt you again, didn't they? she asked softly. I nodded. I couldn't trust my voice. Those children, Martha spat, setting the plate of cookies on the table. The foil crinkled loudly in the quiet room. They are wolves, Robert. I've told you. They're my children, I whispered. The defense, automatic, reflexive. But it tasted like ash in my mouth. Wolves, she repeated firmly. She placed a warm hand on my arm. You need to be careful. I looked at her, confused. Careful? It was just a party, Martha. Just words. She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to me. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. The air felt colder. I saw a car here yesterday, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, while you were at the grocery store. A car, a black Mercedes. Tinted windows. Expensive. My stomach tightened. Brandon drove a black Mercedes. What were they doing? I asked. They didn't knock, Martha said. A man got out. He walked around the house. He was looking in the windows, Robert, cupping his hands against the glass, checking the locks. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. Why was my son spying on my house? He had a key. If he wanted something, he could just ask. Or break in, unless he wasn't looking for something to steal. Unless he was assessing the property, like an inspector. Or an appraiser. Are you sure it was him? I asked. I know what I saw, Martha said. She squeezed my hand, her grip tight. He was on the phone. He looked impatient. Angry. She moved toward the door, pulling her coat tighter. Lock your doors, Robert, she warned, looking back one last time. And check your windows. Family doesn't prowl around in the dark. She stepped out into the rain, pulling the door shut behind her. The lock clicked at her. I stood there in the dark kitchen, the sound of the rain hammering the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. I looked at the photo of Margaret on the table. Help him grow up. I had a sinking feeling that helping him was about to cost me everything I had left. Monday morning arrived under a sky, the color of wet steel. The rain had stopped, but the city felt heavy, swollen with the damp cold that precedes winter. I stood in the lobby of Sterling Global, a cathedral of glass and marble that made human beings look like ants. Security guards with earpieces watched the revolving doors. Men in three-piece suits marched past me, barking into phones, smelling of coffee and ambition. My stomach churned, a slow, acidic burn. I adjusted my tie in the reflection of a brass pillar. It was the same tie I'd worn to the funeral. Why am I here? The question rattled in my head. Was Arthur going to fire Brandon? Or was he going to yell at me? Was he going to tell me to keep my Parasite family away from his prestigious company? I felt a familiar shame creep up my neck. I had spent 40 years as an accountant, finding order in chaos. I could balance a ledger to the penny. I could spot a discrepancy in a tax filing from across the room. But I couldn't balance my own family. I couldn't fix the discrepancy between the son I raised and the man he had become. Miss Vance, a young woman with a tablet approached me. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Top floor. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The elevator ride was silent and fast. My ears popped as we shot upward, leaving the noise of the street far below. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing a reception area that cost more than my house. Go right in, the receptionist said. She didn't look up. I walked toward the heavy double doors at the end of the hall. I took a breath, holding it for a second to steady my hands, and pushed them open. Arthur Sterling was waiting. He stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the sprawling gray grid of Chicago. He didn't turn around when I entered. The room smelled of mahogany and old paper, the smell of serious business. Sit, he said. I sat in a leather chair that swallowed me whole. I placed my hands on my knees to stop them from shaking. Arthur turned slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. In his hand, he held an old leather folder. It was cracked with age, the ages frayed, the gold lettering faded. My breath hitched. I recognized it immediately. He tossed it onto the mahogany desk. Slap. The sound echoed in the quiet room. 15 years ago, Arthur began, his voice low and measured. My father hired a consultant. We were drowning in debt, near bankruptcy. The sharks were circling. waiting for Sterling Global to sink so they could pick the carcass clean. I remember, I said softly. That consultant worked for 6 weeks, Arthur continued. His eyes locked on mine. Day and night. He slept under this very desk on a sleeping bag. He ate vending machine sandwiches. He went through 10 years of financial rot, line by line. Arthur tapped the folder. He restructured the debt. He found the leaks. He saved the company. He saved my family's legacy. He paused, letting the silence stretch. My father offered him a $50,000 bonus, a fortune at the time. Arthur leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk. He refused it. Why did you refuse it, Robert? I looked at the cracked leather. I remembered that day. I remembered the exhaustion, the smell of stale coffee, and the faces of the employees in the break room, terrified they were about to lose their livelihoods. You were struggling, I said, my voice steady for the first time that morning. People were losing jobs, Arthur. Good people. Families. It didn't feel right to take extra when the ship was still taking on water. I only charged $5,000 for expenses. That was the agreement. Arthur nodded slowly. You saved us, and you asked for nothing but your fee. He sat down, the leather chair creaking under his weight. His expression hardened. Saturday night, your son called you a parasite. I flinched. Hearing it from him was worse than hearing it from Brandon. Arthur, I apologize for him. I started. He's young. He's under pressure. Arthur held up a hand. Stop. I knew it was a lie, Robert. A man who saves a company and refuses a bonus is not a parasite. He is a man of honor. Arthur's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his temple. And I do not like liars. Arthur pressed a button on his desk phone. Send him in. The side door I hadn't noticed opened. A man walked in. He was a block of concrete, wrapped in a dark suit. Ex-military. No neck. His eyes were cold and scanned the room for threats before settling on me. This is Mac, Arthur said, head of security. Mac didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He carried 3 thick red folders tucked under his massive arm. He placed them on the table with a heavy thud. Thud, thud. I launched an audit Saturday night, Arthur said. After the party, I wanted to see exactly how successful your son really is. Mac opened the first folder. He spun it around so I could see the papers. Your son isn't just ungrateful, Robert, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I looked at the papers, rows of numbers, dates, signatures. He's a criminal. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the hard drive on Mac's laptop. It was a low, steady whir like a calm before a storm. I stared at the first red folder. In my line of work, red folders never meant anything good. They meant audits. They meant discrepancies. They meant the end of someone's career. Open it, Arthur said. My hand trembled as I lifted the cover. Inside was a glossy proposal titled Project Alpha. It was a logistics overhaul plan. Slick, professional, worth millions. I recognized the formatting. It was the kind of work that got people promoted. A $3 million logistics proposal, Max said, his voice flat and monotone, like he was reading a grocery list. Your son presented this to the board last month. He took a $65,000 performance bonus for it. He called it his masterpiece. I looked at the pages. The numbers were solid. The logic was sound. For a fleeting second, a ghost of pride flickered in my chest. Maybe he is good at this. Maybe he just made a mistake. It's impressive, I whispered, holding on to that shred of hope. It is, Mac agreed, but Brandon didn't write it. He slid a photograph across the polished mahogany. It showed a young man, no older than 24, sitting in a cubicle. He looked exhausted, messy hair, glasses sliding down his nose. Eric, junior analyst, Mac said. Bright kid. Worked here 2 years. Mac tapped the photo with a thick finger. Brandon stole the files from Eric's cloud drive. He changed the author name to Brandon Vance. He submitted it 3 hours before Eric could. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Plagiarism? Theft, Arthur corrected sharply. And then, to cover his tracks, Brandon filed a complaint against Eric. Claimed the boy was incompetent, unstable. Arthur leaned forward. his gray eyes burning. He fired him. Robert. He ruined a young man's career to hide his own laziness. I looked down at the photo of Eric. I thought of my own early days. The fear of losing my job. The pride in my work. My son hadn't just stolen an idea. He had crushed a person. He did that? My voice cracked. For money? It gets worse, Max said. He didn't give me time to process. He flipped open folder 2. Expenses. Receipts spilled out like confetti. Las Vegas. Miami. Cabo San Lucas. High-end steakhouses. Bottle service. Client meetings. Mac read from a summary sheet, his tone dripping with sarcasm. According to Brandon's logs, he was entertaining potential investors. Make had turned his laptop screen toward me. This is from the security cameras at the Bellagio in Vegas. Dated 3 weeks ago. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't look away. The video was grainy but clear enough. A hallway. Brandon was stumbling, his tie undone, his arm draped around a woman. She was laughing, trying to keep him upright. Another woman followed close behind. Neither of them was Tiffany. Room service bill was $4,000 for one night, Max said. Charged to the Sterling Global corporate card. Arthur watched me closely. Total unauthorized expenses, $160,000. While he plays the devoted fiancé to Tiffany. While he plays the successful executive to you. I closed my eyes. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to lead. I had raised him to be honest. I had taught him that a man's word is his bond. Where did I go wrong? Was it the divorce? Was I too soft? Too hard? I didn't know, I whispered. I swear, Arthur. Folder 3, Mac interrupted. He was relentless, a machine of facts. The shell game. He opened the last file. This one was thinner. Just bank statements and invoices. Fake invoices, Mac explained. Variety Consulting. A company called Vance Tech Solutions. I frowned. Brandon doesn't know anything about IT. Exactly, Mac said. The company doesn't exist. It's a P.O. box in Delaware. The invoices are for services that never happened. System upgrades, server maintenance, ghost work, money wired directly to accounts Brandon controls. Arthur added, total theft from this scheme, $150,000. Mac finished. Grand total, Arthur said, his voice heavy with finality. $310,000. The number hung in the air. $310,000. I stared at the receipts, the photos, the lies. My son was a thief, a liar, a predator. Panic surged through me, not for myself, but for him. He was going to prison. My son was going to prison. My son was going to prison. I'll talk to him, I stammered, standing up. My legs felt weak. I'll make him pay it back. I have some savings. My retirement fund. The house. I started doing the math in my head. If I sell the house quickly, if I cash out the 401k, I can cover maybe half. I can take a loan for the rest. I can fix this, Arthur. Please, don't call the police yet. Let me bang. Arthur slammed his hand on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the enclosed space. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. Stop it, Robert, Arthur roared. He stood up, towering over the desk. The boredom was gone from his face. He was furious. Stop protecting him, he yelled. Look at what he is. He isn't a child who broke a window. He is a grown man stealing from the hand that feeds him. He took a deep breath, composing himself. He walked around the desk and stood right in front of me. He looked into my eyes, and for the first time I saw pity there. He isn't just stealing from me, Robert, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. Arthur nodded to Mac. Mac tapped a key on the laptop, bringing up a new document. We accessed his work emails, Arthur said, and his personal cloud. We found his plan. His plan for what? For you, Arthur said. He isn't just a thief, Robert. He is planning to destroy you. Arthur nodded to Mac, a silent command that seemed to lower the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. Mac didn't speak. He simply turned his laptop around. On the screen was a stark white window. An email interface. We accessed his personal cloud drive this morning, Max said, his voice void of emotion. He wasn't careful. His password was Tiffany1. Read the subject line, Arthur said softly. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. My eyes were burning, dry from lack of sleep, and the assault of the last 10 minutes. Subject, the wedding fund. From Brandon to Jessica, Kevin. I felt a flicker of confusion. He's asking them for money for the wedding. Read the body, Robert, Arthur urged. I read the first line. Assets. House $550K. Retirement 401K, $300K. Savings 45K. Social Security monthly. Total liquidatable, turning 95K. I stopped reading. The numbers swam before my eyes. Those weren't just numbers. That was my life. That was 40 years of waking up at 6 a.m. That was the paid-off mortgage. That was the safety net Margaret and I had built. Dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. They appraised my house? I whispered. When? Online appraisal, Max said. Zillow, Redfin. They averaged them out. Why? I asked, looking from Mac to Arthur. Why are they counting my money? Because Brandon is broke, Arthur said, his voice hard. He spent the stolen $310,000. It's gone. Restaurants, travel, gambling, women, and Tiffany. She wants a $850,000 wedding at the Drake Hotel. She wants a house in the Gold Coast. She thinks Brandon is rich. Arthur leaned back, steepled his fingers. He needs a new source of income, Robert, and the Bank of Sterling Global is closed. So he found a new bank. Me, I said. The word felt like a stone in my throat. You, Arthur confirmed. But I would never give him that kind of money. I can't. It's all I have. Mac clicked the mouse. A document opened. It looked official. Legal. Read the plan, Mac said. Step 1, declare Dad incompetent. Step 2, Kevin files for emergency guardianship. Step 3, immediate transfer to custodial facility. Step 4, liquidation of assets. I stared at the words, incompetent. Custodial facility. Dementia, Arthur said. The word hung in the air like smoke. They are going to argue that you have severe, rapid-onset dementia, that you are a danger to yourself. But I don't, I protested, my voice rising in panic. I'm fine. I do the crossword in pen. I manage my own accounts. They know that, Max said calmly. He slid a grainy photograph across the desk. It showed a sweaty, disheveled man in a white coat, smoking a cigarette outside a clinic. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder. Dr. Eris Thorne, Max said. Neurologist, and a degenerate gambler. He owes $40,000 to some very bad people in Cicero. Kevin hired him, Arthur explained. Thorne will sign anything for $10,000 cash. A diagnosis of severe cognitive decline, easy money. My heart hammered against my ribs. They have an appointment for you, Max said. Next Tuesday, $10 an AM. I froze. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Yesterday, the phone call. Dad, just a quick checkup for your insurance premium. It's routine. I'll drive you. Brandon's voice had been so smooth, so caring. I had said yes. I had thanked him for helping me. I had walked right into the trap. Once Thorne signs that paper, Arthur continued, Kevin goes to court. He's a lawyer, Robert. He knows the judges. He'll file for emergency guardianship, ex parte without you there. He'll say you're wandering the streets. Confused. Violent. And then? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They take control of your accounts, Max said. Power of attorney. They sell your house. They cash out your 401k. And me? I asked. Where do I go? A locked facility, Max said. He pulled up a brochure for a place called Shady Acres. It looked grim. Concrete walls, chain-link fences. The cheapest one they can find, state-funded if possible, so they keep more of the profit. So you can't sue, Arthur added. So you can't tell anyone what they did, because who listens to a crazy old man locked in a ward? My vision blurred, the room tilted. My own children. The boy I taught to ride a bike, the girl I walked down the aisle, the son-in-law I welcomed to Sunday dinners. They were going to lock me in a cage, to pay for a party, to buy a house they didn't earn. I couldn't breathe. It felt like a hand was crushing my windpipe. There's more, Max said softly. More? I gasped. How can there be more? The frame's out. Mac turned the laptop again. It showed a draft email. It was written from my email address. To Arthur Sterling. Subject: Brandon's fraud. Arthur, Brandon is stealing from you. He's taking millions. The government is involved. Aliens are watching us. You have to stop him. Brandon created a fake account in your name, Mac explained. He planned to send this to Arthur next week. Why? I asked, bewildered. He's stealing. Why would he warn you? To discredit you, Arthur said. Look at the tone, Robert. Islands. Government conspiracy. It sounds unhinged. He'd get investigated and cleared because he'd hide the real evidence, Arthur said. Then he'd sue you for defamation. He'd use this email as proof in court that you are senile, paranoid, delusional. It seals the deal on the guardianship, Max said. It's the final nail in the coffin. It was evil, pure calculated, industrial-grade evil. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The gray buildings looked like tombstones. The world felt empty, cold. They hate me, I whispered to the class. My own children hate me. They don't hate you, Arthur said from behind me. His voice was not kind, and it was honest. They just don't care about you. There is a difference. I turned around. Arthur was standing now, looking like a general surveying a battlefield. You are an ATM to them, Robert. And the ATM is out of cash, so they are scrapping the machine for parts. I looked at Arthur. I looked at the red folders. I looked at the photo of the corrupt doctor. What about Tiffany? Danny asked. Mac threw a file on the table. It slid across the wood and stopped at the edge. A predator, Max said. Engaged 3 times, never married, always to men with aging parents and trust funds. She drains the family dry, Max said. Then she vanishes. She's pressuring Brandon. She's the shark swimming behind him, smelling blood. My son was being eaten alive, and to save himself, he was feeding me to her. I looked at Arthur. A strange calm settled over me. The kind of calm that comes after a car crash when the noise stops, and you realize you are still alive. What do I do? Arthur reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small, silver device. A voice recorder. Digital. High fidelity. We fight, Arthur said. We let them think they've won, he continued. We let them walk into the room. We let them set the trap. And then we close the door. He held out the recorder. Can you do this, Robert? Arthur asked, his eyes searching mine. Can you take down your own son? Can you send him to prison? I looked at the device. It was small, cold metal. I thought of the word parasite. I thought of the locked facility with the chain-link fence. They thought of Margaret in the hospital bed. Help him grow up. Sometimes growing up means facing consequences. Sometimes saving someone means stopping them before they destroy their soul completely. I reached out and gripped the recorder. My hand was steady. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of a bruised peach. The air was thick, suffocating. My phone rang at 8:30 a.m. sharp. Dad? It was Brandon. His voice was bright, cheerful. A salesman's voice. Don't forget, he said. Dr. Thorne, 10 a.m. It's just a routine checkup for your insurance. I'll pick you up. I gripped the phone. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could sleep at night. I wanted to beg him to stop. But I looked at the small voice recorder on my kitchen counter. The red light wasn't blinking yet, but it was ready. I'll be ready, son, I said. My voice sounded frail. I forced a slight tremor into it. I hope it doesn't take long. I get tired easily these days. It'll be quick, Dad. Promise. He hung up. I dressed in my oldest cardigan. I left my hair uncombed. I put the recorder in my shirt pocket, behind a pen. I pressed record. The clinic was not a hospital. It was in a rundown strip mall between a vape shop and a laundromat. The sign above the door said Thorne Neurology, but the N was missing inside. The waiting room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. Dr. Thorne came out to meet us. He was a small, nervous man with sweat stains on his collar. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at Brandon. A silent nod passed between them. A transaction. "Mr. Vance," Thorne said, wiping his hands on his white coat. "Come on back." The exam room was barely a closet. Thorne sat behind a cluttered desk. He didn't check my blood pressure. He didn't shine a light in my eyes. He held up a clipboard. "I'm going to ask you 3 questions," Thorne said, clicking his pen rapidly. Click, click, click. "What year is it?" "It is 2024, I said clearly. "Who is the president?" I answered correctly. "Count backward from 100 by sevens. 193, 86, 79. Thorne didn't listen. He wasn't even looking at me. He was stamping a form with a heavy red ink pad. Thump, thump. He turned the paper around. Diagnosis: severe rapid onset dementia. Recommendation: immediate custodial care. Competency: void. Thorne smiled. It was a greasy, practiced smile. "All done, Mr. Vance. You're unwell. Very unwell." He handed the paper to Brandon. Brandon folded it carefully like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, doctor," Brandon said. "I'll take it from here." We walked out. As we reached the car, Brandon patted my back. "Don't worry, Dad," he said. "I'm going to take care of everything." He dropped me off at home. As his black Mercedes pulled away, I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to sit on the porch steps. My phone buzzed. A text from Mac. "Got it." He just texted Kevin. "Package is sealed. File the paperwork." The trap was set. Wednesday passed in a blur of anxiety. I stayed inside with the curtains drawn, pretending to be the confused, helpless old man they thought I was. Thursday morning, I arrived at Sterling Global through the service entrance at 7:00 a.m. Mac met me at the freight elevator. He didn't say a word. He just handed me a coffee and led me to the top floor. The boardroom was massive. A long mahogany table reflected the gray city sky through the windows. At the far end, there was a far-end observation room, a small office separated from the boardroom by a large mirror. "In here," Arthur said. He was already waiting. "Sit. Watch. Do not make a sound until I signal." I sat in the dark room. Through the glass, the boardroom was brightly lit. It was a one-way mirror. I could see them, but they would only see their own reflections. At 9:00 a.m., the door opened. Brandon walked in. He looked like he owned the building. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my car. He was whistling. "Morning, Arthur," he called out, tossing a leather portfolio onto the table. He pulled out a chair and spun it around, straddling it casually. "Where's everyone?" Brandon asked, looking around the empty room. "I thought this was a full board meeting." "It is," Arthur said. He sat at the head of the table, his hands folded. He looked like a statue carved from granite. "Then where are the others?" "They aren't needed for this part," Arthur replied. Brandon frowned. "What part?" "My promotion?" The door opened again. A woman walked in. She wore a plain gray suit and a badge on her belt. "Detective Miller, Economic Crimes Division." Behind her was Mac. Brandon's smile faltered. He stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Who is this?" Brandon asked, his voice losing its confident edge. "Detective Miller," Arthur said calmly. "In this?" Arthur reached under the table and pulled out the 3 red folders. He slid them across the polished wood. Slid. Slid. They stopped right at the edge of the table, inches from Brandon's waist. "This is your performance review," Arthur said. Brandon picked up the first folder. Project Alpha. His face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast he looked like a ghost. "You stole it," Arthur stated. "Not a question. A fact." Brandon laughed nervously. A high-pitched, jagged sound. "In my eye," supervised Eric. "It was a team effort. I just polished it." "You fired him," Arthur said. "You destroyed him to hide your theft." Arthur pointed to the second folder. Expenses. He pointed to the third. The fake vendors. Brandon took a step back. He looked at Detective Miller, then at Mac, then at Arthur. His eyes were darting wildly, looking for an exit. An excuse, a lie. "This is a mistake." Brandon stammered. I can explain. The expenses were for business development. The vendors, they are contractors. Stop, Max said. His voice was a deep rumble. We have the bank records, kid. We have the video from Vegas. We have the emails. Explain the $310,000, Arthur said. Explain why the money for IT upgrades went into an account that pays your fiancé's credit card bills. Brandon was sweating now, profusely. Drops ran down his temple. It's a setup, he screamed suddenly. His voice cracked. You're framing me. He pointed a shaking finger at the empty chair at the end of the table. It's my father, Brandon yelled. He's doing this. He's jealous. He's crazy. My heart hammered in my chest. I watched through the glass, my hands gripping the arms of my chair. He's blaming me. He's vindictive. Brandon shouted, his eyes wide with panic. He's trying to ruin me because I'm successful. He has dementia. I have proof. He fumbled in his jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled paper from Dr. Thorne. He slammed it on the table. See? Certified. Brandon shrieked. Severe dementia. He's paranoid. He probably hacked the system to frame me. You can't trust anything he says. Arthur didn't blink. He didn't look at the paper. You paid Dr. Thorne $10,000. Arthur said softly, we have the withdrawal receipt from your secret account. We have the text messages to Kevin. Brandon froze. The paper shook in his hand. And we have the emails, Arthur continued, his voice rising in volume.
Operation Retirement. The guardianship. The locked facility.
No, Brandon whispered. That's private family business. Arthur stood up. He looked at the mirror at me. Is it? Arthur asked. He pressed a button on the wall. The lights in the boardroom dimmed slightly. The light in my observation room clicked on. The mirror became a window. Brandon gasped. He stumbled back, knocking his chair over. Clatter. Dad? I stood up. I smoothed my cardigan. I picked up the voice recorder. I opened the connecting door and walked into the boardroom. The silence was absolute. The room was silent. The kind of silence that hurts your ears. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the air conditioner and the ragged, shallow breathing of my son. I walked toward the mahogany table. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was straight. I wasn't the confused old man in the cardigan anymore. I was the father who had seen too much. Brandon looked at me. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red. He looked small. The arrogant executive who had sneered at me in the ballroom was gone. In his place was a terrified boy who had broken something expensive and didn't know how to fix it. Dad, he whispered. His voice was trembling. You were in there. I stopped a few feet away from him. I didn't sit down. I wanted to stand. You called me a parasite, I said. My voice was quiet and steady. It didn't echo. It just hung there, heavy as lead. Brandon flinched, as if I had slapped him. You humiliated me in front of the entire city, I continued. You mocked my shoes. You mocked my life. And then I pulled the voice recorder from my pocket. I set it gently on the table next to the red folders. Then you plotted to lock me away, I said. You counted my money like I was already dead. You were going to sell my home, the home where you grew up, the home where your mother died. Brandon's face crumbled. The sweat on his forehead gathered into droplets and ran down his nose. He looked at Arthur, then at Mac, then back to me. He realized there was no exit. No clever lie could save him now. So he did the only thing he had left. He begged. Dad, please, Brandon whispered, taking a step toward me. He held out his hands, palms up. You don't understand. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't, I asked, watching him. It was Jessica, he blurted out. And Kevin. They pressured me, Dad. They said you were getting old, that you needed help managing your money. They made me do it. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. Even now, at the end, he couldn't take responsibility. He was throwing his own sister to the wolves to save his own skin. I'm your son, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm your flesh and blood. You have to help me. You can't let them take me. He reached for my hand. His fingers were damp and cold. I looked at his hand, the hand I used to hold when we crossed the street. the hand I had high-fived when he graduated. I pulled back. I stepped away, leaving his hand grasping at empty air. I promised your mother I would help you, I said softly. Brandon's face lit up with a flicker of hope. Yes, Mom. She would want you to help me. She would want you to fix this. She did, I said. She told me you were lost. She told me you needed to grow up. I looked at Detective Miller. She had been standing silently against the wall. A shadow in the gray room. Officer, I said. Brandon looked at me, confused. Dad, what are you doing? I am helping you, Brandon, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. I'm stopping you. Detective Miller stepped forward. The movement was sharp, professional. She reached for her belt. The sound of metal on metal rang out. Clink. Handcuffs. Brandon's eyes bulged. The reality hit him like a physical blow. No, he gasped. No, no, no. Brandon Vance, Detective Miller said, her voice flat and bored. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. She spun him around. He tried to pull away, but Max stepped forward, blocking his path like a mountain. Click, click. The cuffs locked around his wrists. Brandon screamed. It wasn't a word, it was a raw, animal sound of panic. You can't do this, he yelled, thrashing against the detective's grip. I'm getting married. My wedding is next month. He looked wildly around the room until his eyes landed on Mac. Tiffany, he shouted. Call Tiffany. She can fix this. She knows people. Call her. Mac didn't move. He just looked at Brandon with a mixture of pity and disgust. Tiffany isn't coming, kid, Mac said. Brandon stopped struggling. What? She saw the accounts were frozen this morning, Mac said, checking his watch. She tried to withdraw $50,000 at 9:05 a.m. It was declined. Mac pulled up a flight tracker on his phone and turned the screen toward Brandon. She's on a flight to Miami, Mac said. One-way ticket. She left 20 minutes ago. She didn't leave a note. Brandon stared at the screen. The color drained from his face completely. The fight went out of him. His shoulders slumped. He realized the truth. She didn't love him. She loved the lifestyle. And the lifestyle was gone. She left? He whispered. She's a predator, Brandon, I said gently. Predators don't stick around when the prey runs out of meat. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were empty, broken. The arrogance was ash. Dad, he whimpered, please. I looked him in the eye. I saw the little boy he used to be, hiding behind the criminal he had become. It tore my heart in two, but I didn't look away. Goodbye, Brandon. Detective Miller pulled him forward. Let's go. They dragged him out of the boardroom. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I heard the elevator ding. I heard the doors slide shut. Then there was silence again. I stood alone in the center of the room. I felt old. I felt tired. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. Arthur walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. He didn't say good job. He didn't say congratulations. He just handed me a glass of water. Drink, he said. We aren't done yet. We weren't done. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the eye of the storm. Arthur turned to Mac. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like a general ordering an airstrike. Get the others, Arthur said. Clean the board. Mac nodded and tapped his earpiece. Execute phase 2. I sat in the leather chair, staring at the empty doorway where my son had just been dragged out. I didn't need to be there to see what happened next. Mac had monitors set up. He showed me the takedown in real time. The dominoes didn't just fall. They were smashed. Target 1, Jessica. My daughter was at the Platinum Salon in the Gold Coast. It was her sanctuary, a place of white marble, soft music, and chemicals that smelled like lavender and money. She was in the middle of a manicure, her hand resting on a velvet cushion. She was probably complaining about the weather or planning her outfit for the wedding that would never happen. 2 uniformed officers walked in. They didn't care about the mud on their boots or the hush of the salon. They walked straight to her chair. Jessica Vance Miller? She looked up, annoyed. I'm busy. Can't you see? Stand up, ma'am, the officer said. She laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Do you know who my husband is? He's a lawyer. He'll have your badge. Your husband is being arrested right now, ma'am, the officer said calmly. Stand up. Jessica tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She bolted toward the back exit, knocking over a tray of nail polish. Bottles shattered on the floor, red and pink spilling like blood. Detective Miller was waiting at the back door. Nowhere to go, Jessica, she said. My daughter screamed as they cuffed her. She screamed that her father would sue him. She screamed that it was a mistake. She didn't know I was the witness. She didn't know I was the one who had unlocked the cage. Target 2, Kevin. My son-in-law, the shark. He was at the Cook County Courthouse. He was in his element standing in front of a judge wearing a $3,000 suit, arguing a motion. He looked invincible. Then the bailiff approached the bench. He whispered to the judge. The judge's eyes widened. He looked at Kevin with a mixture of shock and disdain. Counsel, the judge said, interrupting Kevin's speech. The court is in recess, Your Honor. I object. Kevin started. Sit down, Mr. Miller, the judge barked. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. 2 federal marshals marched down the aisle. The entire courtroom went silent. They grabbed Kevin before he could pack his briefcase. They spun him around in front of his peers, in front of the judge, in front of the clients he had promised to protect. Kevin Miller, the marshal announced, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and filing false legal documents. The shark didn't fight. He didn't argue. He crumbled. His knees buckled. And for the first time, I saw him for what he was, a bully who only felt strong when he was punching down. He cried as they led him away. Target 3. Dr. Thorne. The raid on the clinic is fast. Mac told me later it took less than 5 minutes. Police kicked in the door of the back office. Thorne was counting cash. My son's bribe money, stacking bills on his desk, next to a half-eaten sandwich. He didn't try to run. He threw his hands up instantly. I'll talk, Thorne yelled before they even touched him. I'll tell you everything. It wasn't my idea. It was the lawyer. It was the son. He gave up Kevin and Brandon in seconds to save his own skin. He handed over the fake medical records, the texts, the bank transfers. There is no honor among thieves, especially not the desperate ones. By 5 p.m., it was over. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. The rain had returned, washing the streets clean. I left Sterling Global through the front door this time. Arthur walked me to my car. You did the right thing, Robert, he said. It doesn't feel like a victory, I replied quietly. It isn't, Arthur said. It's a surgery. It hurts, but it saves the patient. It hurts, but it saves the patient. I drove home alone. The traffic was light. The radio played soft jazz, but I didn't really hear it. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark, just like before, but as I walked up the path, something was different. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence was still there, but the heaviness was gone. The oppressive feeling of being watched, of being hunted by my own children, had vanished. The air felt lighter. I walked into the kitchen. I didn't turn on the light. I sat at the table and looked at the empty chair where Brandon used to sit. My family was gone. Not dead, but like gone. I thought I would feel lonely. I thought I would break down. Instead, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. My heartbeat was slow and steady. My hands weren't shaking. Safety. The wolves were in cages. The locks on the doors were mine again. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I lay down on the bed I had shared with Margaret for 40 years. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't dream of drowning. I slept for 12 hours. The trial wasn't a battle. It was an autopsy. For 3 weeks I sat in the federal courthouse, a building made of cold stone and echoey hallways. The air inside smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a place where lives were taken apart, piece by piece, and laid out on tables for strangers to judge. I had to sit in the front row. I had to look at him. Brandon, he didn't wear a tan silk anymore. He wore a jumpsuit the color of a traffic cone. It was too big for him. He had lost weight. His hair, usually styled to perfection, was flat and greasy. He looked like a child wearing a costume. but his eyes hadn't changed. They were still dark, darting around the room, looking for an angle, a loophole, a way out. When he looked at me, I didn't see remorse. I saw hate, pure, distilled hate. The prosecution calls Robert Vance to the stand. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the witness box, feeling the eyes of the jury on my back. I placed my hand on the Bible. The leather was cool under my palm. "I do," I said. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Miss Chung. She didn't waste time. She walked over to the evidence table and picked up a small piece of paper. "Mr. Vance," she said, projecting her voice to the back of the room. "Can you identify this document?" She handed me a check. I looked at my own handwriting. The ink was barely dry. "It's a check," I said, my voice wavering slightly, "for $25,000. And who did you write it to?" "To my son." "Brandon. And what was this money for?" I took a deep breath. I looked at Brandon. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my gaze. "He told me it was for his engagement party," I said. "He said he wanted to impress Tiffany's family. He said he was a little short on cash." The judge, a formidable woman named Judge Holloway with glasses perched on the end of her nose, leaned forward. "The party at the Grand Plaza?" Judge Holloway asked. "The same party where he called you a parasite." The courtroom went dead silent. "Yes, Your Honor," I whispered. The jury shifted in their seats. I saw a woman in the back row shake her head in disgust. They looked at Brandon not as a defendant, but as something nasty. They had stepped in. Miss Chung took the check back. "And did he use the money for the party, Mr. Vance?" "No. What did he use it for?" "He used it for a down payment on a condo," I said, the words tasting like ash.
"A condo in Tiffany's name. He stole my retirement to buy her love." I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was a tear of anger, not sadness. Brandon slammed his fist on the table. "He's lying," he shouted. "He gave it to me. It was a gift." "Order!" Judge Holloway barked. She slammed her gavel. Bang! "One more outburst, Mr. Vance, and you will be gagged. Do you understand?" Brandon slumped back in his chair, seething. The verdict came back fast. Too fast. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. Usually that means they didn't need to argue. They knew. Everyone stood up when the jury foreman read the slip. "Guilty. Guilty. Guilty. 24 counts. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. Elder abuse. Conspiracy." Brandon didn't cry. He just froze. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. Judge Holloway didn't wait for a sentencing hearing. She had seen enough. She looked over her glasses at my son. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, "you had every advantage. A good education, a good job, a father who loved you." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You preyed on your employer. You preyed on the public. But worst of all, you preyed on your own blood." She looked at me, then back at him. "There is a special place in hell for children who eat their parents, Mr. Vance. But until you get there, you will stay with us." She raised the gavel. 8 years. Federal prison.
No early parole. Bang!
Restitution is set at $405,000. Brandon collapsed. His legs gave out. The marshals had to catch him. "No," he screamed, the sound raw and jagged. "Dad, Dad, do something. Don't let them take me." He was dragged away, his heels skidding on the polished floor. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I sat in the witness box, watching him disappear through the side door. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. And then there was Jessica. My daughter sat at the defense table next to a public defender. She looked small, pale, and terrified. She had taken a plea deal to save herself from prison. She had agreed to testify against Brandon. She had told the prosecutors everything. The texts, the plans, the emails. She sold her brother out to save her own skin. 8 years probation. The judge ruled in 500 hours of community service. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. But as she walked past me, on her way out, she didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. She was free, technically, but as I watched her walk out of the courtroom, alone, shivering in her coat, I knew she was in a prison of her own making. The courtroom emptied. The lights flickered. I sat there for a long time. The silence was back, but this time it was the silence of a graveyard after the funeral is over. The war was won, but the battlefield was covered in bodies. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse swung shut behind me with a final, hollow thud. I stood on the concrete steps, the wind whipping at my coat. The trial was over. The verdict was read. But I didn't feel finished. I felt hollowed out, like a pumpkin scraped clean. Arthur was waiting for me at the bottom of the steps. He wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a man I didn't know, a thin man in a gray suit, holding a briefcase against his chest like a shield. "Robert," Arthur said, his voice softer than usual. "This is Mr. Henderson." He was Margaret's personal attorney. I blinked, confused. Margaret didn't have a personal attorney. We used the family lawyer for firm. "She hired me separately," Mr. Henderson said gently. 2 years ago, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small polished wooden box. It was simple, made of walnut, with a brass latch. "She left this with me," Mr. Henderson said, "with strict instructions. It was only to be given to you if certain events came to pass." "If what events came to pass?" I asked, my voice trembling. "If your children betrayed you," Henderson said. My heart stopped. I took the box. It felt heavy, warm, and terrifying. I couldn't open it there, exposed on the street with the press vans idling nearby. I walked to a concrete bench in the courthouse plaza, away from the crowds. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel the cold. I sat down. My hands shook as I undid the latch. Click. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a leather journal. I recognized the cover immediately. It was the one I had given her for our 35th anniversary. I thought she had lost it. I opened it. The smell of her perfume, lavender and vanilla, wafted up, faint but unmistakable. It hit me harder than the judge's gavel. On the first page, in her neat looping handwriting, "My dearest Robert, if you are reading this, I am gone, and your heart is broken. I am so sorry." I wiped my eyes. I could hear her voice in my head, clear as a bell. "I have a confession to make, my love. I lied to you." I frowned, tracing the ink with my thumb. For the last 2 years of my life, I saw the way Brandon looked at our bank statements when he visited. I heard Jessica whispering on the phone about inheritance while I was in the next room getting chemo. I saw the greed in their eyes, Robert. It was hungry. It was waiting. I gasped. She knew. All that time, while she was fighting for her life, she was watching them circle like vultures. I hired a private investigator. The journal continued. I saw the debts Brandon was racking up. I knew about the gambling. I knew about the fraud he was starting to dabble in. I couldn't tell you. You love them too much. You are a good man, Robert. The best man I ever knew. If I had told you, you would have defended them. You would have made excuses. You would have said, "They're just young, Maggie. They'll learn." I closed my eyes. She was right. I would have denied it until the day I died. So I had to make a choice. I had to protect you from the grave. I turned the page. The handwriting was shakier here, as if she had been in pain when she wrote it. "My dying wish. Help him one last time. It was a trap, Robert." I froze. The wind howled around me, but the world went silent. I knew Brandon. I knew his ego. I knew that if you gave him an inch, he would try to take a mile. I knew that if you helped him, he would get reckless. He would get arrogant. I knew he would try to destroy you, and I knew that was the only thing, the absolute only thing, that would make you see the truth. I had to let you fall, so you could finally stand up. Forgive me for putting you through this pain. But I couldn't leave you defenseless. I couldn't let them pick your bones clean after I was gone. Tears fell onto the paper, blurring the ink. I cried right there on the bench. In the middle of the city, I cried for her pain. I cried for her strength. She had played a game of chess against her own children to save me, and she had won. There was one last line at the bottom of the page. "Don't let my sacrifice be for nothing." Finish it, Robert. Clean the slate. Live for yourself now. I closed the book. I held it against my chest, feeling the solid weight of it. I looked up at the gray sky. The clouds were breaking. A sliver of pale sun pushed through. She had saved me. She had forced me to walk through the fire, so I could come out the other side, burned but free. I stood up. I wiped my face. I looked at Arthur, who was watching me from a distance, respectful and silent. I nodded to him. I knew what I had to do next. The slate wasn't clean yet. There were 3 more names on the list. 3 months later, the city was wrapped in the gray wool of early winter. The trees were bare, their skeletal branches scratching against the sky. I hosted a dinner. Not at my house. That was my sanctuary. Now, I hosted it at a private dining room in Arthur's law firm. Neutral ground. Sterile. Secure. I invited my other 3 children. Mark, Sarah, David. They hadn't been involved in the fraud. They hadn't signed the fake checks or hired the crooked doctor. But they hadn't called me either. Not once during the investigation. Not once during the trial. Not once when their brother was being handcuffed on the evening news. They had gone silent, waiting to see who would win, waiting to see where the money would land. I stood by the window, watching the street below. Arthur stood in the corner, a silent sentinel in a dark suit. He wasn't there to protect me physically. He was there to witness the accounting. The door opened. They walked in. Mark, the eldest. He wore a cashmere sweater and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, the youngest. She clutched a designer bag, looking nervous. David, middle child. He wouldn't make eye contact. He looked at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at me. They smelled money. They thought the storm was over. They thought that because Brandon was gone, the inheritance pie had just been cut into fewer slices. "Dad," Mark said, stepping forward with his arms open. "It's so good to see you. You look great." I didn't hug him. I gestured to the long, polished table. "Sit," I said. They exchanged glances, confused, weary, but they sat. The table was set with fine china, crystal glasses, and silver cutlery. But there was no food. The silver domes on the platters remained covered. "We've been so worried about you," Sarah lied, her voice trembling slightly. "With everything that happened with Brandon, it's just been a nightmare. A nightmare." Even echoed, nodding. "We didn't want to intrude. We wanted to give you space." "Space," I repeated. The word felt cold. 18 months of space. "Where's the food?" Mark asked, forcing a chuckle.
"I'm starving. There is no food," I said.
I reached under the table and pulled out a heavy black ledger. It was old school, bound in leather. I placed it in the center of the table. Thud. The sound was heavy, final. "Just math," I said. They froze. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I opened the book to the first bookmarked page. "Mark?" I said. He straightened up, his smile faltering. "Yeah, Dad. 5 years ago, you came to me crying. You said you had medical bills. You said the insurance wouldn't cover the surgery for your back." I ran my finger down the column of numbers. "I gave you $60,000. I took it out of your mother's life insurance." Mark swallowed hard. I needed it, Dad. My back. I saw your Facebook photos, Mark," I said, my voice flat, 2 weeks after I wrote the check. "You bought a boat. The Sea Breeze. You didn't have surgery. You had a midlife crisis." Mark's face turned bright red. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "Sarah," I said, turning the page. She flinched. 3 years ago, you wanted to start a boutique, a sustainable fashion brand. You needed seed money. $40,000, I read. You said you were renting a space in Wicker Park. It's seer to the market was bad, Sarah stammered. The business failed. It happens. You never opened the store, I said. You went to Europe, twice. You posted pictures from a villa in Tuscany. You drank my savings in wine. She twisted her diamond ring, looking down at her empty plate. "David," I said. He looked up terrified. 2 years ago, a down payment for a house. You said the baby was coming. You said you were desperate. $35,000, I said. And then you ghosted me. You changed your number. You didn't invite me to the housewarming. You didn't invite me to the christening." I closed the book. The sound echoed in the silent room. Total unpaid debt, I announced. $135,000. Dad, come on, Mark said, his voice rising. We're family. You can't hold this over our heads. We intended to pay you back. Did you? I asked. I stood up. I walked to the head of the table. When Brandon stood in that ballroom, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, and called me a parasite, I looked at each of them. I locked eyes with Mark, then Sarah, then David. You were there. I saw you, I said. You were standing near the buffet. You held his champagne. You heard him humiliate me. And you laughed. The memory burned bright in my mind. The chuckle from Mark, the giggle from Sarah, the smirk on David's face. Dad, we were scared, Sarah whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. Brandon was intense. We didn't know what to do. No, I said. You weren't scared. You were comfortable. You saw the power shift. I said. You thought Brandon was the new king. You thought I was the old dying lion. So you sided with the winner. I am done, I said. Done? David asked. What does that mean? I am cutting you all off. I have updated my will, I said, gesturing to Arthur. As of this morning, everything, the house, the savings, the investments, the settlement from Brandon's seizure of assets, everything goes to charity, and to a fund for victims of financial fraud. You can't do that, Mark shouted, standing up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's our money. That's our inheritance. It was never your money, I said calmly. It was mine, and your mother's. We're family, Sarah cried. You can't do this to family. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the greed. I saw the entitlement. I saw the strangers they had become. Family doesn't eat their own, I said. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy oak door. Arthur opened it for me. Dad, wait, Mark yelled. Please, we can talk about this. Goodbye, I said. I walked out. I didn't look back. I left them sitting at a table with no food, staring at a ledger that proved exactly who they were, stunned, empty, and finally accountable. A year has passed. The calendar on my wall says December, and Chicago is once again locked in the grip of winter. But this winter feels different. I don't live in the suburbs anymore. I sold the house, the tomb, the memory box, the crime scene. I didn't want the ghosts. I didn't want the creaking floorboards that sounded like footsteps in the middle of the night. I live downtown now, a condo on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen lake. It is modern, clean, and quiet. There are no leaks. There are no shadows. I work with Arthur. We started a foundation, the Vance Sterling Initiative. We help small business owners protect their assets. We help the elderly set up ironclad trusts so their children can't rob them blind. I spend my days looking at spreadsheets, finding the traps before people step into them. It is satisfying work. It is redemption. I have new friends, real friends. Martha comes over on Sunday. She takes the train into the city, complaining about the wind, but smiling when she sees me. We drink Earl Grey tea. We talk about books. We argue about politics. She doesn't want my money. She doesn't want my connections. She just wants to know if I've read the latest Grisham novel. Tonight the snow is falling softly outside. It swirls against the glass, white motes dancing in the darkness. Inside, the fire is gaslit and warm. I have a glass of single malt scotch in my hand. The room is peaceful. Then the silence is broken. Boozed. My phone vibrates on the coffee table. The screen lights up, harsh and bright in the dim room. Unknown number. Location, Federal Correctional Facility. Tarave. Out. I stare at the phone. My heart gives a single, heavy thump. Not fear. Not anymore. Just a dull ache like an old fracture when it rains. It's Brandon. He calls once a month, like clockwork. He thinks if he calls enough, the wall will crack. I pick up the phone. I don't answer it. I just hold it. I can imagine him on the other end, standing in a line of men in orange jumpsuits, holding a plastic receiver that smells of sweat and desperation. Usually he begs. Dad, the food is terrible. Dad, I need money for the commissary. Dad, I'm scared. Sometimes he screams. It's not fair. You ruined my life. I'm your son. You owe me. I look at the name on the screen. I think of the rain soaking my shoes outside the Grand Plaza. I think of the word parasite, whispered to a room full of billionaires. I think of the red folders. And then I think of Margaret's journal, resting safely in my nightstand drawer. Enabling isn't love, Robert. Sometimes love is letting them fall. He isn't calling because he misses me. He isn't calling because he's sorry. He is calling because he needs a host. I take a sip of scotch. The liquid is warm and smoky. I press the red button on the screen, decline. But I don't stop there. I go into the settings. I scroll down. Block caller. I press it. A small message pops up. This number will no longer be able to contact you. I set the phone back on the table. The screen goes dark. The silence returns. It isn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the old house. It is a clean silence. A silence that belongs to me. I walk to the window and watch the snow covering the city, burying the grime, making everything new again. I am alone, but for the first time in my life, I am not lonely. I am free.